Morning, Dennis.
Good morning.
And Tammy.
Morning,
Take it away.
Stephen.
I will. With me to talk about the many ballot proposals that we might see in November is Shelli Weisberg of the ACLU and John Pirich of the Honigman firm. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. So I want to start here. I want to talk about ballot initiatives sort of generally and why I'm not a fan of ballot initiatives. There's two reasons I think that they're problematic. One is that they often deal with pretty complicated legislative imperatives, and they rob us of the ability to sort of shape those legislative ideas, right? I want to do this, but I only get to say yes or no to it. I don't get to say, yeah, I like that, but maybe we could change this, or maybe we could think of it in a different way. And so I think that the potential to make bad law is really high with ballot proposals. The other reason I don't really care for them is that you have to buy your way onto the ballot in the state of Michigan. I mean, the way the rules are set up, you really do have to pay to get signatures, and we do have a ballot initiative this year that's an exception to that, but it's sort of an exception that sort of proves the rule. So I want to get both of you to talk just a little about ballot initiatives and whether we're doing that right in the state of Michigan.
Well, I don't disagree with you fundamentally, except that in my experience as a lobbyist for the last 17 years, what I can say about why ballot initiatives seem more important now is because we've had this very kind of volatile legislature, and they change the rules depending on who's in power. So for the purposes of our ballot initiative, which is promote the vote, to put common sense voting rights into the Constitution, we're doing so because the legislature has simply failed to modernize our voting system. Right. And so the Promote the Vote ballot initiative is a constitutional amendment that sets standards which the legislature or the Secretary of State will have to then shape the policies around. So to that extent, there's going to be some public oversight into what that looks like. But I think we're in an era where, because of the division of the parties and the we versus them attitude, that we can't depend on the legislature to make the rules that are necessary. So direct democracy has become the default.
Yeah. John?
Well, we're one of 7 states that allows direct participatory democracy through ballot proposals. I think your point, though, is a valid point, and that is, other than the bottle bill in 1976 and this year's current redistricting proposal, most of the proposals have been purchase proposals.
Right.
And if you have $1.5 million to $2 million, you can get anything on the ballot if you are organized and prepared to get signatures in 180 days. I think it's a valid criticism to say it had a fundamental reason for being in our Constitution initially. From back to 1908 we've had it.
Right.
But since the 61-62 convention, a lot has changed. And one of the big changes, as you point out, is paid circulators. That just changed everything. Now we have invasions of circulators who come in from other states who have no interest in this community, this state. And the difference between a community-based petition like the bottle bill or, like in this case, the redistricting is fundamental.
Yeah. So let's start by talking about the redistricting proposal. Voters, not politicians. What do we think of that idea?
I am all for some rules around redistricting. They did an amazing job going out and getting support for it. It's a complicated proposal. Mm-hmm. And we certainly hope that at one point we can address this issue of gerrymandering in a way that's fair to everybody.
Yeah.
I'm supportive of the concept, and I don't have any predictions on whether it will pass.
But I think the problem with it is so complicated,
yes.
And whether it passes constitutional muster before it even gets to the ballot is the first question.
Yes.
Even then, if it does and it gets on the ballot, there will be further constitutional challenges, and it really changes the dynamic of this whole process. Yeah. We just don't know, unfortunately.
Right. And with that proposal in particular, my first concern about ballot proposals is this idea of up or down. You're changing the way that we choose our representatives in the state and you're setting up an entire system through that ballot proposal without the give and take that I think would probably produce a better system on the back end.
But to your point, and to Shelli's point also, one of the problems going back to the bottle bill was the legislature repeatedly wouldn't bring up that issue. Wouldn't do it. So in that case, I think it served a very productive goal. But with some of the other ones that are on the ballot this year, or are going to try to be on the ballot this year or other years, it really isn't the same situation. It's people who go around the legislative process to say, I can buy this, I can put it on. And you know, the energy issue is a good example.
Yeah.
California person comes in, spends a lot of money.
The 30 by 30 ballot
exactly.
that failed to get.
Well, there's going around the ballot. There's going around the legislature, and there's finally doing what the legislature should have been doing in the first place. You know, so it's really holding the legislature to account for what they've just failed to do. I mean, the issues that are up for the ballot, paid sick leave, voting rights, gerrymandering, we've been asking the legislature to take care of those issues for the past decade or so, and they haven't. So this is where we are, right?
Do you want to talk more about Promote the Vote, which is...
Sure. Promote the Vote is a really common sense set of policies. That it's a constitutional amendment, because we all care about the integrity and security of our voting system. And Michigan has not updated, modernized voting in over a decade. We're one of the few states that hasn't. So this ensures no reason absentee voting. It ensures that military and overseas voters get their ballot in time so that their vote counts. It ensures that you can register to vote with ID up until the day of the election. It ensures that you can vote a secret ballot, because we saw what happened when Chris Kobach tried to get information out of our Secretary of State on Michigan voters. And it puts in a requirement that elections should be audited. There should be oversight, so we can make sure that everyone's vote count in a fair way.
Yeah.
So it's very common sense. It's got a lot of support. We are using a paid firm as well as volunteer signatures.
So who could be against those things?
I don't think anybody. I don't think we haven't seen a ton of opposition, to tell you the truth, because it is pretty.
But to be fair, there are people who can be against it, and there are people who are very much against it.
Yeah.
And whether or not you find gerrymandering to be some despicable, dastardly process, the reality is it's been part of our political history.
Yeah.
And we've had litigation about gerrymandering going on now for over 150 years.
Yeah.
It's not a new subject.
Yeah.
I think to your earlier point, as complicated as these kinds of proposals can be, the voters are left with a simple up or down.
Yeah.
And you know what the campaign will be? If we have 6 proposals on the ballot this year, the most simple campaign message is going to be vote no on everything.
Right.
And that will resonate with a lot of the voters. It really will, because they don't understand.
Because they don't understand what,
exactly.
What's that.
But voters are smart, and especially now, I think voters are very aware about what's going on and how our democracy is not working very well. And I think we've seen voters really become much more in tune to this type of direct democracy.
Yeah.
So I think a no campaign, it could certainly be successful. It's also unfortunately cynical, and I think we should give Michigan voters some credit for using their brains when they go to the ballot box.
But it's also expensive to make sure that they do understand what the proposals are. And there again, that introduces that dynamic where really well-funded ballot initiatives have a lot better.
It's an investment. That's
a lot better.
And another point, you can say voters are smart or voters get issues, but the problem is, let's take this upcoming election. There's going to be a 25% drop-off from the top of the ticket to ballot issues. So that automatically says 25% of the people who went out to vote for the top of the ticket aren't going to do anything. They're not even going to look at it. And we have the same problem with nonpartisan races, especially judgeships. I mean, people don't know who they're voting for.
Yeah. Let's talk about the marijuana legalization proposal that I think we're likely to see. What do you think?
Well, we were the drafters of the petition, and as you know, it was certified, and let's see, Tuesday will be the 40th day deadline.
Right.
So unless the legislature adopts it, which I have no idea whether they will or won't, it will be on the ballot, definitely.
Yeah, and what do you think about that idea of the legislature trying to sort of go around the people? That's the opposite of what you were talking about.
I think they'll never. I can't in my wildest dreams imagine they could get it together enough to, to pass something. I really don't. There's so much controversy within the legislature.
But that's where deal making comes in. I think they called that log rolling in the old days. If there was a way to put a deal together, I'm sure certain people would like to do that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, once certified and after the 40 session days pass, it's on the ballot.
On the ballot.
And I wanted to show you one quick thing. These are the ballot issues that were the petitions for this particular cycle. It's a tremendous amount of material information that's put out there on the street. And then when people are approached by a circulator, sign this petition. It's for making roads better, or it's making schools better, or helping children. No one knows what are in most of these proposals.
I disagree. I think people are engaged. I mean, I think people are much more engaged than I think you're giving them credit for, honestly. So
Even with the circulators coming around and saying, here, sign this, you think people really understand what those are?
I've seen some of the circulators. They seem to know what they're talking about. People seem to want to engage in the process in that way. So
Yeah.
Most of the circulators I talk to don't have the faintest idea what the proposal's about.
Right.
They truly don't.
John, what other ballot issues do you think we're likely to see in November?
Well, you already mentioned the two, the earned sick leave and the minimum wage proposals. They were just turned in last week, so we don't know yet what the situation with that is. There are two or three that obviously didn't make it. The Line 5 petition didn't make it. The part-time legislature didn't make it. The energy proposal, a compromise was worked out between the parties so that it was not on the ballot. And redistricting, we don't know because of litigation. And the last one is, of course, the promote to vote one.
and we're well on our way.
Yeah.
Sure.
If we were going to change something about the way we do this in Michigan, what would you put on the list there?
Ballots or
The ballot proposal.
Oh.
The process of ballot. Or do you think we're doing it right?
I don't have a problem with the way we use the process here in Michigan. I don't think we overuse it. I would say that the legislature could be more engaged in some comprehensive debates over these types of reforms.
Yeah.
That's what they were elected to do, and they should do it.
Right.
But so I don't really I don't think our process has been abused.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. John?
It depends what cycle you're looking at. There are certain times I think the paid process really doesn't do us well as a state. There are other times I think that the population will, like for instance on marijuana right now, I think there's no doubt there's a groundswell of support for recreational as well as medical marijuana. That's how we got medical marijuana in the state, was through the ballot. So it just depends on issues. I don't think you can categorize it with one broad sweep.
Yeah, I mean that idea that the legislature should reclaim more of the policy-making process, the structure of the legislature, which is one of the things that we're thinking about with ballot proposals, sort of has a lot to do with that. I mean, it's hard to do that with the term limits that we have and with the gerrymandering.
Right. I think I think that's true that it's hard, but I don't think it should be used as an excuse. I mean, it's not a panacea to take away term limits. I wish they would, but it wouldn't be a panacea.
And term limits is another good example of, I think, a proposal that many people, in retrospect, wish we had not engaged in and was not approved. It's changed the dynamic dramatically.
It has.
Okay.